Setting up your meeting. Meeting is now streaming. Yay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Renee Hobbs, and thanks for joining us to the launch of our new series. It's called Across the Generations. And over the next 6 or 7 months, we're going to be learning together about the developmental milestones, trajectory, journey that is media literacy across the lifespan. We've gathered up a group of experts and people who are passionate about media literacy to think through what the developmental trajectory is like in 2022 and 2023. And we're so happy that you've joined us. So if you haven't yet introduced yourself and put your introduction in the chat, please do so. Because one of the things that's really exciting about this program is the fact that we get time for networking to really dig into these questions about what media literacy looks like and feels like, and is how it is experienced across the lifespan. So I think the best way to get started is simply to kind of give you a sense of why now, right? Why now? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen here. Why now? This series in 2022, 2023. It's simply because as media literacy is sort of increasing its visibility to a lot of new stakeholders, we're starting to think out of the box of simply school and schooling. We're starting to think about media literacy as something that's an entitlement that everyone deserves. And what a great lineup of presenters we have for this series. So we're going to go across the lifespan until we get to the end, and then we're going to try to create some new knowledge. I guess we'll be creating new knowledge all the way through the whole program as we think through what these speakers have to offer us and what themes emerge. But to tell you the truth, and I have to be frank and candid with you, we don't know exactly where we're going. We don't know exactly what we're going to discover. And that's why we need you, right? That's why we need your active participation and your help. We want to figure it out together. So we're gathering an online community to start that conversation. And you showed up because you want to be part of that conversation. So we're thrilled about that. It might be a good time to mark your calendar to plan for the whole series. It's about every 2 or 3 weeks in November, December, in January, in February, and in March. So take a look at the schedule for the whole series by going to mediaeducationlab.com/across-generations, and you can see the whole lineup. Now, our structure in this fast and furious, we start on time, we end on time. We'll start with an emotional check-in. Faith Rogow is going to share some ideas with us. We'll have a small group breakout group where we have some discussion with you and a small group of participants to sort of make sense of these ideas in relation to your own expertise and your own practice. And then we'll come back together in a large group for some reflection and synthesis. Let's start with the emotional check-in, shall we? If you're familiar with Media Education Lab webinars, you know that we sometimes use the annotate function of Zoom. If you'd like, you can use the annotate tool and identify which of these 7 ages of human, these 7 ages of human, do you identify with? Which one are you feeling right now? Right? Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, or wherever it is in your time zone. Which one are you feeling? And of course, I'm feeling like Doc. I'm doing my work here at the Media Education Lab, so I'm in Doc land. Yep, there's a dopey, there's a happy. If you choose not to annotate, you can just unmute your microphone and tell us which of these 7 ages of man fits your emotional state right now, and tell us why. Open up your mic and tell us, why'd you pick?
I'm happy because it's been a while since I've been on with this group. And so I'm very happy to see everyone and be starting a new series. Thank you, Renee.
Woohoo! Pam, we're so glad you're here. Who's next? Unmute your microphone and tell us why you picked the Disney characters you picked.
I'm Karen Burke. I'm from Southern Connecticut State University in the Communication, Media, and Screen Studies Department. Renee, you helped one of my students with her dissertation. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I'm in a doc mode because I'm grading like a mad woman.
Thank you for sharing. I can definitely relate. We'll hear from two more people. Unmute your microphone and tell us which of these characters is most like you right now. Right now.
Hey, I'm Asiye. Can you hear me?
Hi, Asiye.
Hi, I'm joining from South Carolina, Columbia. I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of South Carolina working on global literacies. And I picked Sneezy because I was so sick last Wednesday weekend, and I'm slowly recovering, coming back from that. But I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad to begin this new learning series.
Being sleepy or happy or dopey or grumpy or sneezy or doc or wherever you are is good for us. Come as you are. Come as you are to the Media Education Lab. We're super happy to have you here. If you like, you can put which of these characters is most like you in the chat. Give us a little emotional check-in, but we want to press on. Now to do that, I have to turn off my annotation tool. I'm so pleased to introduce Faith Rogow, one of my oldest and dearest media literacy friends, a person who I rely on for thought leadership in this field. We go back way back to the founding of Namely, even before it was Namely, right, Faith? And you have had a major influence on the field by two important books that you've written in this field. Of course, with your colleague Cindy Scheib, you wrote The Teacher's Guide to Media Literacy, and the new one, wow, Media Literacy for Young Children, Teaching Beyond the Screen Time Debates, published by the very prestigious National Association for the Education of Young Children. Faith, we're thrilled that you're kicking off the series for us because of your important contribution to the field. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you. I am going to share screen here. And if I were doing the check-in, it would be sneezy because I am recovering from COVID. So if I sound a little nasally or I sniffle a little bit, please forgive. This is just easy. If you need to contact me, still the easiest way is a DM on Twitter. I'm still on Twitter. Don't know how long that's going to be for, but still there. But let me kind of jump right in here. So we just ended Media Literacy Week here in the United States, and if you looked at the hot topics of the events, things that were listed, you'd find all kinds of interesting things, you know, AI and propaganda and privacy and surveillance and news and social media effects, and none of them are appropriate for preschoolers. So it's clear that a lot of folks kind of just don't even think of. And when I say, so when I'm going to be talking about young children, I'm really kind of focusing in on the 3 to 6 year old range here. Most people don't even think you can do media literacy with kids that young. And some people have actually concluded that because they envision media literacy as something else, as those kinds of topics that are appropriate for teens and young adults and older folks, that media literacy, in fact, shouldn't even start in the early years. And in early childhood, especially in the United States, but also in some other places, there continues to be significant opposition to young children using tech. And this stems from a public health approach to media literacy. So instead of using an ed approach, this is an approach that identifies media as problem, media as dangerous, and the goal is to keep kids safe or to think of it, media as disease, and the goal is to keep kids from getting sick, right? And in the early years, mostly that ends up as recommendations about screen time limits. And one of the reasons that that doesn't work for me is because you can limit screen time all you want. You can keep kids away from screens. It's less and less possible, but you can keep kids away from screens, but you can't keep them away from their culture. And their culture right now is digital, and it is a media-rich culture. So if you can't do that, then is the old public health framing serving us? And I argue that it doesn't, that we need to switch to an education frame, because in real life, children aren't knights. They need more than armor and shields. And they only need fighting skills if our goal includes having children see and treat media as their enemies.
It's delicious, buddy.
I don't think that we can position their culture as their enemy. Also, because you can't tell a child not to feel what they already feel, right? If they're already enjoying, if they're already getting pleasure from some of the media, even media we find problematic, then our role as educators can't be to condemn that media. So what do we do instead? We use media literacy inquiry approach to add new information and perspectives that can help children think in more complex ways about the media that they enjoy. I mean, after all, we don't wait until students can comprehend sophisticated literature before we teach them how to read, right? We want them already to be able to read when we know that their brains are ready to deal with the sophisticated discussions around literature and other kinds of texts. So what I've done is to think of how we approach this issue in a way that is parallel to literacy. So to be clear, I want to be really clear here. This is not, much as media isn't our enemy, not savior either. There is definitely roles for regulation. There are definitely roles for media criticism and identifying significant societal problems and thinking about them. But if we want to prep kids to be able to grapple with those things, then we can't use a pedagogy of avoidance. And that's essentially what a public health approach does. So I start by going back to goals, because in education, we always start with the end goal and then we backwards map to figure out how we can get there. So the purpose, here's my goal. Media literacy education is about habits of inquiry and skills of expression, and almost everything you do will fit into one or both of those categories. And why? I mean, it's not just any old inquiry or expression. It's that people need to be lifelong learners, critical and creative thinkers, effective communicators, and engaged ethical community members and citizens. So that's my big goal. Paralleling to traditional literacy, because it's not, we're not teaching decoding in the same way that we would decode print, and media, digital media set especially, is much more accessible than print is to very young children. But I think there are significant parallels to what we do with traditional literacy. And here are three of them. The first parallel is that we don't position media as enemy. I mean, have you ever heard a reading instructor position what they do, or talk about books as a problem, or focus on book safety? If there's an enemy here, it's illiteracy, right? So that's kind of partly what I want to get at. Second thing is we approach the work with joy and imagination instead of out of our anxieties and fears. And that's really critical, and also parallels what happens in emergent literacy, right? When you walk into a kindergarten classroom, for instance, that's doing early literacy stuff, there is a great positive energy, lots of creativity in the room. I think that we need to bring that to media literacy. And very often we do the opposite. We bring all of our worries and anxieties and we build lessons from there. So I want to switch that paradigm. And the third thing that parallels literacy is we want to make media literacy inquiry routine, automatic, and everywhere. So just like we have reading and writing all across the curriculum in every subject area, every grade level, right? We want that to also be true for media literacy. But also we want it to be that this kind of set of thinking skills, we want it to be as automatic as reading is. You know, if once you learn how to read, you can't look at a page of printed text and not see words. Your brain will not let you, right? That's what we want for critical inquiry skills. We want the questioning and the ability to find answers and to think about these things and give evidence and use logic and reason. We want that to be as automatic as reading is, that you can't even imagine. It would just be weird to think of looking at media, engaging with media, and not have questions come to your mind, right? That's kind of the goal. So when I say I want this to be a parallel thing to literacy, that's what I mean. So what does this look like if we're going to apply it to very young children? And there are three pillars, essentially. There's competencies, questions, and knowledge about media. And let me just quickly go through the last one first. So there are tons of things that we want people to know about media, right? You can't teach little ones tons of things, and they can't grasp tons of things. So I really started thinking, all right, if they get these three concepts, these are really kind of, everything else builds on these three. So if they get these three, they're kind of ready to begin stepping into the next thing. So the first one is all media are constructed, media shape and are shaped by us, and people use their individual skills, beliefs, and experiences to construct their own meanings from media messages. So all media are constructed. When we explain that to young ones is, well, people make media. And that's an aha for some little kids, right? To them, media seems like magic. They press a button on their tablet and media appears, or you hand them your phone and media just appears, right? So we want them to understand that in fact, people make media. Why is that so important? Because if you don't understand that, then it is very difficult to understand that in fact, people who make media make choices. And they make choices about what to include and what to exclude. And that influences what we think, what we experience, the messages that we take away. So in order for them to be able to engage in any sort of analysis or thinking about media, they have to understand that people make media and that those people make choices. And I won't have time to go into this in great detail, but the best way, by the way, to teach that is to have them make media and make some of those choices, right? That's in a concrete way how they're going to get that. I also put that little thing on the bottom there, that reminder of that's why media are never neutral or objective, because people are making media and they are making choices. That's really a reminder for the adults, right? That is not something that a young child is going to be able to understand. So if we go back to the other one, that the media shape and are shaped by us, this is probably the toughest one developmentally to get at. Especially things like how our choices are tracked and that kind of stuff, right? Young kids aren't going to understand. They don't even understand what it means to be online and connected to other folks. So they're going to have trouble tracking that. But what we can explore is why we choose certain media, and also that media are sometimes our ideas about the world come from media. And that some of the sources that we're taking those ideas from are really credible and reliable and great. And maybe some are not so much, not because they're intentionally disinformation, but because in kids' terminology, they're for fun. They're not trying to teach us specific information. So I just did a whole riff in a recent keynote that I did on the video Baby Shark, which has 11 billion views on YouTube. Right. Well, Baby Shark also is just full of wrong information about sharks, including the implication that sharks hang out in families. They don't. But it's not intentional misinformation. We can help kids distinguish, oh, this is a good place to get information, this isn't. Or we can help them pay attention to patterns. So if all the fairy tales we read them have the forest and images of the forest is a scary place, then maybe we shouldn't be so surprised when they're hesitant to go outside when we say, oh, let's go hang out in the forest, and they maybe don't want to go, right? So we can get into that a little bit. And then the last one, this kind of version of everyone interprets through their own filters. kids can begin to understand that we all have a shared lens that we look at the world through, otherwise communication would be impossible, but that we also, over that shared lens, have a unique filter that is just ours, right? Based on our own experiences and what we know and what we can do and what we think and where we grow up and how old we are and things. This is absolutely critical for early childhood educators, and actually for most educators, because one of the biggest differences between us and the people we teach is age. And just that difference is going to make a big difference, highly likely that we interpret differently than the children with whom we work. But we can also help kids understand how their own filters work, why they might be thinking or experiencing a certain kind of thing. It's why we ask questions about media. And that asking questions is one of the ways that we learn about one another, because we can anticipate other people are going to think different things than we do, and they might not be wrong. And it's also where we can begin to help children practice attaching their answers to evidence. And that's going to be important because we present that evidence as our common ground when we're talking. So we don't have to have everybody agree with us, but we do have to have everybody be able to give evidence. Now, you know, the kind of evidence that a 3-year-old gives may seem totally off the wall to you. What we're talking here more is about developing habits around this stuff. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. I want to just go on to briefly introduce the third competency, the second pillar, which is competencies. So because we approach this as education, we need to be able to describe what we expect kids to learn. And so I've mapped out 10 competencies, plus a question mark because the technologies keep changing. There may be other competencies that come up. But for now, we've got 10 solid competencies, and some of them will seem very familiar to you. Inquire, which is analyze, basically. Evaluate, create, act, right? Although we in the field have gotten used to, for some odd reason, calling these a definition as opposed to competencies. But that aside, they're not enough for young children. Other competencies kind of jump out when you have to begin to introduce this stuff to young children. So notice that there are some other ones there. Comprehension, for example, which is rarely done with older kids, but it's worth asking, what is this, right? Do you know what it is you're looking at? For young kids, it also might be, are you just comprehending, for instance, a narrative, right? Can you retell the story and get beginning, middle, end right? So because so much of media for young children is in this narrative form, that kind of comprehension, which is the same thing that we teach for literature, for print books, is important. You might notice down bottom left-hand corner, the connect, collaborate one, which sometimes is explicit, sometimes not for older kids. But because being online is an abstract concept for young kids, it's really important to give them collaborative opportunities that aren't abstract. So for example, maybe commenting on a media document or a question that they have using something like VoiceThread, where they don't have to know how to read. They just have to learn how to record what they want to say. And then they can listen to their classmates and you know, those kinds of collaborative softwares. Or we can have them making media together, although the younger the child, the more you're going to look for projects where they can participate as an individual in a bigger project, as opposed to it's a collaborative project, which is not developmentally appropriate for very young children. Or the attend competency. This is a new one to most people. It's really just about noticing the media in your environment. I recognize this as media, and that's important because we're going to teach a set of skills to get your brain going when you encounter media. If you don't recognize something as media, you don't activate those things. Oh, I'm not thinking about this. I'm not asking questions because I don't recognize this as media. So it's attending to media in the environment, and also what a science teacher might describe more as kind of careful observation, right? That I'm actually paying attention to what this media is saying to me. Engage and explore is probably the most different one for folks. This really plays off of the idea of how important the notion of play is in early childhood. That you can't do developmentally appropriate education in early childhood without including play. And so we want to give opportunities to literally play with the technologies, right? Hand over a camera and just let them see what they can do with it. Sometimes we can do it a little bit guided, right? We can give them a stuffed animal and a camera and say, can you figure out how to make it look big, right? Or can you figure out how does it look taking it from, different shots and different sides and things. But mostly it's about letting them explore and engage with these technologies kind of on their own without having a specific project to do or a specific skill set to master. And we know that when they do that, when we let them play, they end up doing all kinds of interesting things, especially with cameras. They, just like in their free play, they create their own narratives and kind of soap operas. Well, some of them will choose to film those soap operas, right? they will have their classmates as characters, they will, or dolls as characters. They will create these elaborate stories and things, and they will want to film them, or they will want to document important moments. I just built my tower taller than I've ever gotten it to be before, and that's a big deal. So they create these little mini documentaries kind of. And finally, to reflect. Check-ins are really important for this age. They're just beginning to figure out what their bodies do. They're just beginning to learn names for their emotions. So we want them to have routine habits of reflecting. And of course, I depict them as gears because we want to do all of these, right? A gear system doesn't work if you just engage one, right? You have to kind of get all of them working. So it's really important that we don't say just teach them how to use video, how to create, how to take a photograph, and not teach them also to reflect and inquire and do all the rest. And that's because media literacy educators don't just want students to be better or safer media users, we want them to be better thinkers. And that brings us to the third pillar, which is asking questions. And we do this not by giving them a list of questions, but by categories of questions. And categories are important for this group, mostly because any list that you give is not necessarily going to be developmentally appropriate in terms of wording for young kids. So this gives us flexibility to have wording that makes sense. But also, even developmentally appropriate wording doesn't always work out. So you could ask something like, well, who's the target audience for older kids? For young kids, that might be, well, who is this for? Which would be more developmentally appropriate. But the form of the question also might end up being, would your sister think this is funny? Right? That's also a target audience question. So when we train early childhood educators to do this, we train them to think in these categories and then figure out the wording that makes sense for them to attach to what a child is doing. We also start the questions with the phrase, I wonder. I wonder why this was made, right? I wonder why they made these choices. And we do that because this is the start of a conversation. It isn't a quiz, right? This is not a call and response kind of Q&A thing. We want this to be part of a conversation and talking about media. Later on, if people have questions, I can come back. One of the questions you will not see on here is, what did you like? And that could be a response question, but it's not a very good inquiry question most of the time, unless you have a real reason to know the answer to that question, right? If you're a librarian and trying to figure out what books to recommend to kids, then knowing what they like could be important. But for some reason, especially in early childhood, we ask, what do you like all the time, even when that answer is irrelevant? And because you can't attach it to evidence, right? I like vanilla ice cream. Try to convince me that I really should like chocolate better, right? There's no logical argument to be had there, right? So it's not a great practice question. And then we ask questions in strings. So we always ask with follow-ups, and the categories let us do that. So it's not just who's telling this story, it's how do you know, right? Or do you have more questions? Tell me more about that, those kinds of follow-ups. You can get access, by the way, if you use the QR code, or it should take you to that URL there. This handout is available for free download on the Project Look Sharp website. So The other important things about this question stuff from an early childhood perspective, that we ask questions about pictures and not just about words. And this becomes much more obvious in early childhood than for older kids, but it might benefit older kids too. There's so much information that comes at us now in images. And in early childhood, it's obvious because the books we read are filled with images. So we want to make sure we're talking about the pictures and what they're taking away, what information they're taking away, ideas they're taking away from the pictures. And also that the questioning, the focus is on habits instead of answers, right? If you've ever worked with very young children, you'll know sometimes the answers they give to questions are just absolutely off the wall. That's okay. What we want them to is to develop the expectation that when we are using media, we ask questions. And I can give tons and tons of examples. I don't want to take too much time just giving specific examples, but for instance, somebody who's reading aloud and asked a predictive question, right? What do you think is going to happen next? Instead of going on after taking a couple of responses and just saying, oh, okay, let's see if you're right, right? For each response, say, well, what makes you say that? That's interesting. Tell me more about, what you noticed in the picture that made you think that's what was going to happen next. Like I say, the answers don't always matter, right? As long as they're in that habit of, okay, I'm supposed to attach evidence to my answer. And eventually they will start, right? It does become a habit. We can ask questions about things in their everyday lives, like food packaging. Is this food wearing a disguise? So like, is what you see on the box really what's inside the box, right? Or what are the clues? What's it saying to me? Can I learn to read a language of clues that they use in something like food packaging? So color is, one of those. So if it's brown and it's in a kid's cereal, it probably means it's chocolate. But if it's brown and it's on a pasta box, it probably means it's whole wheat, right? So we can begin to help them learn to discern clues like that. And we can talk to them about the art that they're making or the pictures that they're making. Let's say they write a story and they're illustrating the story. If you're doing it in a digital app like Book Creator, you can look at their picture and say, wow, if I were standing in that picture, what sounds would I hear? And in Book Creator, they can go in and they can add the sounds, right? They can make their own sound effects. They can do the sounds, but it's much easier to do if they can attach that file to something in the picture. And if there's nothing in the picture yet that shows the sounds that they think you would hear, then we can make them better communicators by saying, okay, well, then maybe you want to add to that drawing and add something that would indicate that, oh, you would hear this sound if you were in my picture. So we want to offer opportunities to create a lot with this age group. We want to do much less telling, much more asking. And almost all the time, instead of providing answers, we want to start with well, so how could we find out? And we want to narrate the process of how we would find out together with them so that they begin to understand how you use a search engine, how you select the sources that you find, and narrating why we present any media sources to them, right? I chose for us to read this book today because we were studying plants and I wanted something that actually had pictures of real plants instead of just drawings. So I found this book and that's why we're looking at this, right? It takes all of about 15 seconds to do that. If you do that routinely, what they're doing is not just learning to trust the authority, but learning the criteria that we use to discern what's a reliable source. So just simple changes to our own practice can go a long way to creating this culture of inquiry. It's not about telling kids what to think about media or showing children what they miss by pointing out what we notice. It's about asking them what they notice and helping them build the skills they need to see more. It's not about, oh, you've been fooled, right? Because that just positions kids as fools. That's not a good pedagogy, right? It's, oh, we can learn these codes. We can learn to spot things. We can talk about things. So with that said, I want to give time for folks to talk in breakout groups. And I just kind of put, so I know that all of you aren't early childhood educators. And what I wonder is if some of the things that have come up for me in creating things that are appropriate for early childhood would affect your own practice. I mean, it'll be obvious if you are an early childhood educator. So here are just some of the questions you might think about as we go into breakout groups. What if we frame the challenge as illiteracy for your own practice, right? What if you taught from a place of imagination and joy instead of anxiety and fear? What if you emphasize the development of habits and not just discrete skills or knowledge? What if you don't position media as enemy? And what if you use the question categories instead of a list? How might those things influence your actual practice of media literacy education? So, Renee, let's do some breakout groups.
Okay, I am just jotting the key ideas from the slides into the chat, and that will give you a little bit of reminder about some of the things that that Faith has invited us to discuss. There they are. I'm opening up the rooms. We're going to take about 10 minutes to discuss. Please take some time to introduce yourselves to the folks in your small group meeting, but have a lively and free-flowing discussion as you take in and respond to some of the ideas that Faith has shared with us. The rooms are open. Have a great conversation. We'll see you back here in about 12 minutes or so. Make a new friend or see an old one. And if you're having trouble choosing a breakout or joining a breakout room, just let me know and I will assign you. People are moving into breakout rooms. Samantha, I'm going to assign you to room 4. You should have that. You should have gotten that invitation now. Anybody else need help moving into the room? Wansuk, so great to see you here. Michelle, Shirley, let me know if you need some help. Okay, Faith, I suggest you go into room 2, my friend.
Yeah, actually, I want to look
Sorry,
at the
I just
chat.
went to the restroom. Sorry, I had to step away. I'm going to
No
the
worries, no worries, no worries. You're here now. Let's see, who needs help
So-
getting into a room? It looks like we have 3 people in room 6. We have 4 people in room 5, 5 people in room 4. Shirley, you're I'm gonna move. You're in room 3. Let me know if you need a re-invite. Faith, I would say.
Don't put me in a room. I'm
gonna move this person to room 1, and I'm gonna move Yanti to room 1. There we go. So I've just got rid of room 2. Okay, are you gonna stay and chill for a moment?
Yeah, I want to look at the chat. And
Oh yeah, great idea. Okay,
so-
cool. I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
Cool.
Hello. Good evening. I'm really sorry for being so late. I didn't calculate it. The time difference changed because we are now on the light saving time. And because I'm in Bulgaria, we have now 6 hours difference and not 7. So really sorry that I missed.
Well, welcome
No.
anyway, and people are just coming back from breakout rooms, and then we'll get started with a kind of a wrap up thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
the discussion was just getting going too. We had a great discussion in our breakout room. We're going to play Pass the Talking Stick. Here's my talking stick. It's my pen. I'm going to invite someone to share an idea that came up in your small group conversation that was interesting or important to you. Just put your thumb up in the air and I'll pass a talking stick. We're going to hear from about 5 people in just the next 5 minutes. There we go. Audrey, I pass the talking stick to you. What was something interesting that happened in your discussion group?
Hello. We were just talking about, in my notes, I wrote down Faith's point. I thought it was really great, but when she was talking about how instead of asking, because, you know, it's like we talked about how it's hard to share complex ideas with kids that are that young, like 3 to 6 years old, you know, but asking simple questions, like instead of like, what do you like about like this book or this movie or this show or this character or this drawing, you know what I mean? Just kind of asking just a little more, like what in the picture made you feel this thing? Because, you know, like if we break it down into something a little more simple, like what about the movie made you happy? What about that song made you sad? You know what I mean? Like just kind of, and like you said, their answer doesn't necessarily like matter too much, but just getting them in the habit of thinking critically, like instead of just being like, I like this piece of media, you know, kind of being like, what about the media made me like it or made me think this way, like just kind of getting them in the habit of thinking why. Like
Nice.
I thought that was a really good point, and I never thought about it like that.
Sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. Who's next? Pass this. Audrey's going to choose someone who puts their thumb in the air or indicates they want to share something that interesting insight that came up in your small group meeting that you think everybody should know. Put your thumb up. Karen, I see a thumb up. Audrey's passing the talking stick to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. I like this question. What would your friend learn? Because then you can start talking about whatever they bring up. It might be gender, it might be race, you know, color of skin, because then you can start talking about media representation. And I've never really thought about doing that. That's a really, really good idea. And even though I teach adults, I can easily still use that. That's a great, that's really, really great. So thank you for that.
Bravo. Pass the talking stick. Karen is going to pick somebody in the room. You can cold call Karen, or you can.
I'm not sure I can see everybody, but
put your thumb up if you have a comment you'd like to add, or we're going to call on you. Maureen Dwyer. Yeah, my friend. What was that idea that came up in your small group that was interesting to you?
Just our conversation about the negative connotation, perhaps, of the term media literacy, and that it's the enemy. As an early childhood educator, that media has been basically a tool to present something rather than a mode of exploration, and thinking about all the ways that in inquiry-based learning that we promote hands-on exploration, that we help kids create meaning and help them with their genuine natural curiosity become intentional about their curiosity. And so teaching media literacy as we would anything else, let them get their hands on, let them explore. It makes so much sense. It really, again, rather than a curated tool that I'm bringing in to present this information and then I'm taking it back out, it's getting in there and teaching them to be critical learners and ask questions, as I do in any other thing that I'm teaching about. So
Beautiful. So well put. Okay, so I really want to call on others of you, including Kate and Ed and Teresa and Randall, and what a great group we convened in this session. But Faith, I want you to have the last word because you kicked us off with this session. What's one big takeaway you want to leave us with? Microphone.
Well, I'm sharing screen again. Sorry, I wanted to do the share screen again. Just to put this out there that sometimes we get into these kind of narrow frames of this is what media literacy is supposed to be. And I really look at it as more like things like the competencies are fixed pieces that we have right now. But teaching media literacy is like using a kaleidoscope. And there's this fixed set of skills and knowledge, but we can turn that around and jiggle it into an infinite variety of intriguing combinations. And so this notion that we need to bring our creativity to it. We need to bring our sense of fun to it. Right? That's what I really want to leave people with.
Oh my God, that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's give Faith a round of applause for her contribution to kicking off our discussion today. And listen, I want you to mark your calendar, and I want you to mark your calendar right now. Come back on Tuesday, November 15th. This lunch hour from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. We have featured presenter Kristen Zimke. She's on the call here. She's going to be talking about media literacy and the elementary school child. What a great learning we're going to have. We're keeping notes about the paradoxes, the challenges, the new ideas that we're getting. Our learning community is going to get a lot out of this semester, this seminar series. Thanks for joining. I'm Renee Hobbs at the Media Education Lab. Have a great rest of the day, but thanks for joining us today. Bye now.